ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we have a special guest, and it is none other than Joe Casey, who I feel almost like I don't even need to introduce you or tell anybody who you are, but I first became familiar with you because of Ben 10. You were the one of the co-creators of Ben 10 alongside the rest of the Man at Action group, and you actually brought me back to Wildcats. Which I'm gonna show some age myself, and you did a lot of stuff for Youngblood. You wrote a good dose of Superman, Adventures of Superman, and you've done stuff pretty much all across the board in the spectrum of comics and just media in general. It is an absolute pleasure. It is an absolute pleasure to speak with you.
Well, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So I guess to tell the people, like, you know, what we're talking about is I think this was probably in May. I think it was May the 4th for Free Comic Book Day. There was the drop of the Jonny Quest Free Comic Book Day issue, which usually I have my ear just better to the ground on this sort of stuff, but that was like, oh wow, I was like, there's a Jonny Quest coming out. I had no idea. And they recently had some more previews and stuff of it, I believe in some of the more recent stuff like Space Ghost. And yeah. I was curious, like, what brought you to Jonny Quest?
Well, they asked me. That's the first thing. They got in touch and asked if I wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. And I assume these things are kind of a shot in the dark. They didn't know if I had any love for Jonny Quest or not. Or turns out I had some love for that IP. And I was actually surprised that I was so interested when they asked me. You know, I thought it was out of left field. But once I thought about it and once I came up with the story I wanted to tell, it turned out to be a pretty good match, I think. I'm pretty happy with the work that we're doing so far. Well,
I could definitely say just based on the Free Comic Book Day preview and some of the other stuff I've seen, it looks great. It looks like it's going to be a blast. And I guess something I kind of want to dig into just a little bit was, like, you mentioned your interest in the IP. Like, would it be like a safe assumption that, like, you grew up, like, you know, interested in Jonny Quest, or was it something that came later? Or well,
it's been around so long. I mean, it was there before I feel like I had an interest in anything. Mm-hmm. Ubiquitous from birth, it felt like, because, you know, Jonny Quest only had one season produced in its original form back in '64. But ever since then, it's just made the rounds on network Saturday morning television for as long as I can remember. Mm-hmm. You know, for as long as there was Saturday morning cartoons, which there are not anymore.
Sadly.
When there was Saturday morning cartoons, talk about aging ourselves.
Yeah.
Every couple of years, a new network would get the Jonny Quest license for those first, 26 episodes or whatever. So it was just on, seemed like all the time. Mm. And for me, the thing that I loved about Jonny Quest as a kid was that it looked so good. It looked like the best comic books out there. Mm-hmm. And then you find out later if you do any digging that it's Doug Wildey and Alex Toth, and those guys are master comic book artists in their own right. So of course the show is going to look amazing. So it was this great oasis of quality in kind of a sea of not so great quality Saturday morning cartoon. You know, it was probably the best looking cartoon of my youth. Mm-hmm. So that was my entry to it. And then in the '80s, there was a big independent publishing boom. Pacific Comics, First Comics, Dark Horse Comics started then. And there was a comic company called Comico who published Grendel and Mage, all these great books. And they also published a Jonny Quest comic that was written by the great William Mester Loebs. And I read that comic as a kid. And a lot of people have fond memories of that comic. It was really, really great. So between the comic and the cartoon, I felt like those are my Jonny Quest bona fides. They're pretty good ones, I think. I mean, there's been other iterations, other cartoons, but those are the main ones for me.
That was, yeah, you bringing up the comic from the 80s. That was actually something I was looking at too. I was like, man, I'm actually kind of shocked that this, yeah, and I could be wrong, but I feel like this might be the first Jonny Quest comic that's been out in a while. I think that you're doing a Dynamite. Like, I don't recollect any that had come out between then and there.
I think there's been a couple things here and there, and then I think DC had the license for the Hanna-Barbera characters about 6 years ago, and they did some things, like they did this series called Future Quest, which was pretty cool. Had a lot of cool little spin-off titles from that, but I don't think there's been a dedicated Jonny Quest series for quite some time. It's been a while.
Well, like, how does it feel though to like take something like that is, I think, probably like kind of like you said, like one of like the earliest examples of like, you know, the best cartoons had to offer, you know, from back in the day. Like, how does it feel to bring that, like, you know, to, I guess, you know, not like, because, you know, obviously, you know, people who grew up with Jonny Quest, you know, that still read comics, you know, they're obviously going to have some kind of a connection to that, but also like introducing it to new readers. What does that feel like to you?
Well, I hope that people dig the concept and the characters. I mean, that's the way into the IP for people who know Jonny Quest. It's such a basic story, or at least a basic setup. You know, a scientist father and his kid and his adopted son and their kind of secret agent protector travel the world doing, you know, and these globe hopping adventures. They're pretty easy to get into, you know, simple way in. From there, it was just about, to be perfectly honest, I wanted to honor the voice of the show, which I always felt had this real, very unique style to it. It was not necessarily realistic, you know, but it had its own voice. It had its own vibe to it. This kind of, you know, it felt like a comic book, you know, dialogue and the way the characters interacted. There was a bit of a light touch to it, but there was also drama. There were real stakes, but nothing that was too horrific. Just had this really light, deft touch that I wanted to capture in the comic. Luckily, we found the right artist in Sebastian Piriz, who, you know, really sells that vibe, that Doug Wildy vibe, but modernized. And so it was all about hopefully getting the voice of the characters right, getting the relationships right. And the story that we're telling really cracks open some of those relationships. And the fact that it's a father and a son means that it's a generational story. And so I wanted to lean into that and talk about what the generations mean, especially when you look at it through a modern day lens, a present day lens. So I don't want to give too much away on what happens in the story, but that's a big part of the story that we're telling. And you know, there's a lot of surprises, but I think we examine the relationships, especially between Dr. Quest and Jonny, in a way that no one's ever done before.
Well, and the thing that I was curious about too, regarding that is, you know, because I know with some of the other properties and, you know, IPs, you know, that Dynamite's been tackling lately, for the most part, I want to say, yeah, pretty much all of them have been like, you know, with the exception of like Gargoyles, because it kind of already had like you know, like a pretty long history that was, you know, being picked up by Greg Weisman. How I guess what is going to be like the entry point? Is it going to be kind of like a continuation of those old adventures, or kind of more like just a reimagine, like kind of like jumping back in, I guess, kind of like in media res?
Well, it's interesting because the Kamiko series from the 80s took place in the 80s. It was a sort of present day story that just took the Quest family and transposed them into the 1980s. What we're doing, people who've read the Free Comic Book Day story, it starts out in 1964. It places the characters in their original year, which I don't think has ever been done before. because I feel like those characters, if you play them correctly, are best served by putting them in the time period they were created to be. And being of that time plays a big part in the story that we tell, this initial storyline. So it was important to set it in 1964 so that you weren't having to worry about the characters seeming quaint when they echoed their, original incarnations, or that you were modernizing them so much that they became unrecognizable. I wanted them to feel like the characters from the cartoon.
Right.
And that meant not saddling them with modern trappings of any kind or modern sensibilities or, modern reference points. They're 1964 all the way.
I think that's probably honestly, it's probably the only way I could think would be a good way to tackle it. Cause I feel like, yeah, under a modern lens, I don't know if, that same magic of the series would still be 100% intact.
Yeah.
But something that you mentioned earlier that, it is something I've paid a lot more attention to recently is, when trying to capture the voice of something that, people already might be kind of familiar with, and you're no stranger to this because you've been in the game a long time, but what are your best practices, I guess, would be for trying to capture that voice, when you write Johnny, he reads just like how you would expect, or race band, and he reads just like you would expect.
Well, it comes from having seen the show for so long. Having been exposed to the show. And when I got the gig, I went back. The whole first season is on Tubi for free. So I just went back and watched it again, renewed my appreciation for the craft of the show, but really listened to the voices and listened to how they interacted and each character's specific cadence and things like that. And, it's different in a comic where it's being read as opposed to a cartoon show where you're listening to it. They're speaking the dialogue. But I think we got pretty close. What's interesting, the one thing that I didn't know about Jonny Quest that I realized in sort of my research, which has nothing to do with the comic, but the voice of Jonny Quest was voiced by an actor named Tim Matheson. Tim Matheson went on he was Otter in Animal House. He's the vice president in The West Wing. He's a very well-known actor. I had no idea he was a child actor who did the voice of Jonny Quest. Now when I hear Jonny Quest, all I hear is his voice. Because I've grown up with Tim Matheson and didn't even know it.
It reminds me of the day that I learned that Uncle Phil was the voice of Shredder on Ninja Turtles. It was kind of oh wow, this is I learned that, or I think one day just doing some research, I realized that the voice of Panther on Thundercats was the grandpa on the Cosby Show. I was just like,
yeah,
wow,
world colliding.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, I was like, this person is serious. They don't do stuff like this. But it's like, hey, it is kind of an eye-opening thing, because how do you envision that? I wonder if does it make it harder to re-envision that voice, or does it give you a new appreciation for it?
I mean, I've worked in animation for the last 20 years almost, so I know all the nuts and bolts of that industry. So I had that appreciation. We cast somebody, like J.K. Simmons was a voice in Generator Rex. And at the point we cast him, I was like, wow, J. Jonah Jameson's going to be a voice in our cartoon. That's cool. So you gotta just go with it and realize these are actors. They're going to have different roles, and God bless them for having careers where they can do different things.
Yeah.
But it is kind of funky now to watch a show when you know the actor now, and like, oh man, am I hearing the character? Am I hearing the actor? Am I hearing another character that he's doing? It's bizarre.
Well, to further your point about J.K. Simmons on Generator Rex, the first time that I had heard his voice, I was already aware of the TV show Oz. So the whole time I was just like, oh. I was like, is that the same guy?
That's an even bigger leap. My God.
Yeah. Well, it's like whenever you see someone in for the first time, it's like kind of what sticks with you for a bit, and that was what it took a long time to get past. Oh, the guy from Oz. Now he's since become Jade Jonah and the guy from the drumming movie that I can't remember the name of at the moment. Yeah, yeah, Whiplash. Like he has now become that guy, but like a long time ago, it used to be like, oh yeah, that's the guy from Oz.
Right.
But I guess this kind of brings me to my next thing. There's some things about Jonny Quest that like I feel like never really got because obviously it only got the one season, so it never really got to be explored. Staying away from spoilers or anything. There was a character on the show named Jade that I feel like kind of popped in, popped out, was like there for like I think I might be I might be underselling it, but I think she was only there for like a couple of episodes. Like stuff like not just specific to Jade herself, but like are there any other like little kind of like things about like the original show that never really because obviously didn't get a chance to be fleshed out that like you feel like you might take an opportunity to jump on?
Well, it's funny because before I took this gig, my greater memory was of the 80s comic that William Esther Loebs wrote. And he really explored the Jade character and some other elements of the show he went deeper than the show could go. And so I have for Jade in particular, I have a deeper interest in that character because of the comic book as opposed to the cartoon, where, as you say, she kind of popped in and out here and there. And I was surprised when I went back and watched the show how little she's in it, based on how important she was to the comic book series. I mean, she had her own miniseries or spin-off miniseries that was drawn by the Kubert brothers.
I didn't know she had a comic of her own. So
yeah. So I would say that I definitely have more of an affinity for that character because of the comics. And rest assured, there are more than Easter eggs, but a lot of that lore shows up in the comic book. Because I mean, comics is more than TV. You can get deeper into the characters. You can really explore their relationships. You just go further. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that if you only know the cartoon, we go on a deeper dive in the comic book for sure.
Okay. Well, then, I mean, that actually sounds really like awesome because that's one of the things that I feel like I have kind of loved about some of the more recent comics that have come out, where kind of revisiting an older IP that like things that either there was just not time for, or things that maybe were ideas that just didn't I guess just didn't work at the time, or there just was no there was just no space to have it. And like, because you were talking about a cartoon that's like anywhere between 18 to 20 minutes long, some odd minutes long. You don't have time for everything. So I like seeing that, I like seeing that how these things can kind of be touched on. I guess another thing too, because I know Jonny Quest kind of spans some generations. The thing that I thought was pretty cool, is just you talk about the family dynamic. You talk about the family dynamic of it, with Dr. Quest, you got Johnny, you kind of have, this kind of it's like a really interesting kind of like found family element when you add in Haji and Race. And of course you can't forget about Bandit, cute, adorable, lovable dog. But I just because like I feel like like the whole like kind of blended family deal, like that is something that I found has kind of become more of a theme in a lot of stuff lately, like found family, blended family, like people kind of coming together, and family kind of like father kind of passing the torch to the son, so on and so forth. One of the things I always felt kind of like I guess maybe not took as much of a backseat, I guess because I was a kid, I didn't think about it, but like because it was like Johnny had all the fun. Right, obviously, but and Race got to get in on the fun too. Race, Haji, and Bandit, they got to get on the fun. But like is there going to be any more exploration into Dr. Quest?
Oh, definitely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. That he's to me one of the more interesting characters. You know, the found family thing, I really feel like Jonny Quest, the show, the concept was a little ahead of its time with that
Mhm.
aspect. And what I like about that whole concept and what we play up quite strongly in the comic is that sense of loyalty to each other.
Mhm.
You know, those guys had each other's backs at every turn. They never betrayed each other. There was never, even for a story, they
Mhm.
never let each other down on purpose. And there's something kind of it's very comforting in a way,
Mhm.
you know, that this quartet is so
Mhm.
close, considering the milieu that they operate in and what their kind of missions are and things like that. They are a family, and
Mhm.
they stick together as a family. So that was really important to uh, see it in the comic. And I'll tell you, there's always that approach of saying, okay, here's a strong family for the sake of drama. Let's break them apart. Let's really mess with them and put them through the ringer, through the emotional ringer, through the
Mhm.
dramatic ringer. And luckily, we came up with a story that allowed us to do that without splintering the family unit, which I
Mhm.
didn't want to do because that loyalty aspect is so important to me personally. Um, and in something like, you know, Dr. Quest and Johnny and Haji and Race, it goes beyond blood ties, it goes beyond friendship, it goes beyond the concept of family. I mean, they just stick together like you couldn't believe through, you know, all these adventures. And I think whether they intended it to or not back in the 60s, that's the foundation of the whole thing for me.
Mhm.
Um, you know, that's something that you can count on. And I didn't want to ruin that for people who, whether they are conscious of it or not, it's more than comfort food. It's just, you know, there's something about Jonny Quest when you watch the old show, you just feel good about that family unit.
Mhm.
You know that whatever challenges they face, whatever conflicts are going to happen, it's not going to threaten the bond that they have, you know. And that you can't say that about a lot of other IP like that. You know, certainly genre IP.
Mhm.
There's always that story that tries to break them apart, that always tears them apart from the very core. You know,
It's like we're
it's
not
an old,
friends anymore.
yeah, it's an old trope. It's an old trope.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the sacred cows of storytelling. I kind of feel is it could be put away.
Yeah,
Like it's not. I don't even think it's so much bad. I think it does get overused though. I feel like in places where it probably doesn't belong.
well, it's easy. It's an easy
Yeah.
trick because
Mhm.
then you get the emotional release of getting them back together.
Mhm.
Now you've got your emotional arc in place, and you know it can get a bit lazy sometimes.
And just because earlier I mentioned that Dynamite's been doing just a lot of like really good, mostly just like bringing back like beloved IPs. I have
Yeah,
to ask. I feel like I would be not doing my diligence not to ask. But is there any hope that we see maybe something similar with like something like stuff like Generator Rex or Ben 10 like or in the future maybe like a comic book revival of some sort or anything like that?
that would be great. Those things are always floating in the ether for
Mhm.
us. You know, Ben 10's been around for almost 20 years now. Or
I was
I
gonna say
can't
I think
believe
it's creeping up on the anniversary of.
that's crazy. And you know, in that 20 years, it's had three or four iterations, different versions of the show, and which at this point tells me that it's when it's gone, it's never gone for long.
Yeah.
Whatever form it comes back in, we're pretty confident that it will come back. To be quite honest, it's too successful not to come back. It makes too much money for too many people for it to not come back.
It's a little siesta for a little bit. That's all. That's all
Yeah.
they're doing.
Well, these things, it's always good to give them a little rest.
Yeah.
So when they come back stronger. I mean, that's what we tell ourselves anyway.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, if it wasn't already in the cards, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah, I think it would be an awesome thing.
Yeah.
But I guess the last thing is so correct me if I'm wrong. We're looking at the first issue of Jonny Quest dropping. I believe it's August the 14th.
I think that's right.
So not too terribly far away. I would definitely say plenty of time to go run to your local comic shop. Maybe put in that request.
Sure.
Get in the pull box, because I feel like just I've had a lot of I would say probably more than a lot. I've had a great deal of faith in a lot of the stuff I've seen coming out of Dynamite just in the last like year, 2 years. And this looks like it's going to be right up there with it. I think, especially if you're like even the slightest bit of a fan of Jonny Quest, in any iteration, I would imagine. I think this is going to be something special. So there'll be links down below for people if y'all want to go check it out. Go pre-order it, or once again, go to your local comic shop, go get that hooked up. And yeah, I guess it also while here is it. I mean, obviously, Jonny Quest. That's the thing that we're talking about now. But is there anything else you wanted to plug while you were here?
I've got a series from Image coming out right now called Blood Squad 7, which is a superhero series that takes place within the shared Image universe. There's a lot of guest appearances and flashbacks to old Savage Dragon stories, old Spawn stories, but with this new team in place of an old team that is not part of the Image universe anymore, quite honestly. So that's going on. Really, that's a really fun series. At DC, I'm writing the Kneel Before Zod series, which is going on right now.
I think you're only issue 5 now, I think, is out, or
6 just came out.
Okay. Wow. Jeez. Oh my God. Yeah. So please go check that out.
that's been really fun. And yeah, Jonny Quest starts in August. And I will say this about Jonny Quest: if you've watched the cartoon and you've read the comic, and I still can guarantee you've never seen a Jonny Quest story like this one. It is unique in the canon so far. But having said that, if you love Jonny Quest, this will give you everything you love about Jonny Quest. We've really gone the extra mile to make it feel like the cartoon at its best, while it's not just a rehash. But I mean, like I said, Sebastian Piriz, the artist, has a style that sits right in that pocket of Doug Wildey, Alex Toth, but is not a copy of those guys. But he just really captured the spirit of the design of the show. So I mean, I couldn't be happy with how the book is turning out, how it looks, how it feels, how the characters play out. I was writing this morning the script for issue number 4. And we're really in the zone now. So I hope people pick it up and dig it. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't be happy with it.
Well, I could definitely say, just based on the stuff I've seen, it looks pretty. It reads like Jonny Quest to me. I literally, when I was reading through this most recent issue of Space Ghost, and there was a preview in it, and I was reading, I was like, oh, yeah, sign me up. I was like,
great.
Sign me up. I'm in.
It works. Fantastic. I'm glad to hear it. That's great.
It looks like it's going to be fun. And that's what I think it should be. It looks like fun. It doesn't look like it's trying to like be something that it's not. It looks like it's trying to be faithful.
Yeah, this is not the Watchmen of Jonny Quest comics. Yeah, that's not what we're trying to do here.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sure Alan Moore could write a mean Jonny Quest, but I don't know.
Really?
I don't know if that would be the first thing I would reach for.
Yeah.
On the on the shelf.
I'd like to think that Alan Moore is magically genius enough to know that you don't do the Watchmen of Jonny Quest. It's pretty good how it is. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah.
But I just want to say thank you so much for just taking your time to sit and chat with me about this. I'm very excited for this. This is something I think is really cool, and I never realized how much I actually liked Jonny Quest until I saw the free comic book day issue in the preview, just because like it was one of those things kind of far removed from my mind. So I'm very happy that this is a thing. It actually kind of as a guy who's old enough to remember Jonny Quest in syndication.
Yeah.
Across multiple networks. I was like, oh man, this kind of takes me back. So,
I felt the same way once I started writing. I thought this is really pretty goddamn good.
Yeah.
This is some fun stuff. So if that translates, then that's fantastic. I'm really happy about that.
You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.